Long before the rise of kings, before cities were built, pyramids raised, or empires carved into stone, something glittered in the dust of riverbeds. A bright yellow metal, soft to the touch, resistant to time, and unlike anything else found in nature. That metal was gold. No one knows exactly when gold was first discovered, because gold was never truly invented. It was found. Unlike iron or copper, it needed no smelting, no fire to release it from rock. It lay in the open, shimmering beneath the sun. And in that shine, early humans saw something eternal. The earliest known gold artifacts date back over 6,000 years, discovered in what is now Varna, Bulgaria. There, in a prehistoric cemetery by the shores of the Black Sea, archaeologists uncovered intricately crafted golden jewelry, rings, beads, and scepters, buried with the dead. These items weren't crude lumps of metal. They were shaped, smoothed, designed, which means that even then gold had value. And more than that, it had meaning. As human societies began to take shape, gold became a constant companion to the evolution of civilization. From the riverbanks of the Nile in Africa to the floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, early people found gold in its natural form, pure, untarnished, and dazzling. It didn't rot like wood, it didn't corrode like iron, and it didn't fade like dyes or paint. Gold was permanent. A miracle in an impermanent world, but its value wasn't only in its durability. Gold was beautiful, the color of the sun, of firelight, of life itself. In many cultures, its glow was associated with divine power. In Egypt, it was linked to the sun god Ra and believed to be the very flesh of the gods. In Incan mythology, gold was said to be the sweat of the sun, while silver was the tears of the moon. Even in regions where gold was rare, myths formed around its radiance, as if humans instinctively recognized it as something sacred. And gold was more than beautiful, it was workable. Unlike harder metals, gold is incredibly malleable. It could be hammered into sheets, twisted into wire, or shaped into beads, all without heat. This made it one of the earliest materials humans used to express artistry, identity, and hierarchy. It was the first metal to become symbolic, a material that spoke not of tools or survival, but of status and story. But this raises a question. Why gold? Why did this particular metal rise to such prominence across so many ancient cultures, while others, like lead or tin, remained largely practical? The answer lies in a unique combination of properties. Gold is rare, but not so rare as to be unattainable. It's stable. It doesn't react with oxygen, so it doesn't rust. It's dense and heavy, giving it a physical weight that feels important in the hand. And crucially, it doesn't decay. An object made of gold thousands of years ago still shines today, as bright as the day it was forged. That timelessness gave gold a spiritual power. It became a symbol not just of wealth, but of immortality. In this way, gold was different from every other material known to early humanity. It couldn't be eaten, worn for warmth, or used in tools. And yet people sought it. They carried it, buried it, offered it to the gods. Gold became the first true luxury, a material valued not for what it did, but for what it meant. And across the ancient world, its meaning grew. In some regions, gold was used to decorate the bodies of the elite, in crowns, earrings, and collars. In others, it was buried with the dead, a gift to guide souls into the afterlife. In sacred temples, it adorned idols and altars, believed to attract the favor of the gods. Everywhere it appeared, gold came to represent something more, a connection to the divine, a mark of greatness, a token of eternity. From the moment it was discovered, gold began shaping how humans understood power, status, and the cosmos. And in turn, humans began shaping gold, refining it, treasuring it, and building entire cultures around its presence. This was just the beginning. The discovery of gold set into motion one of the longest and most enduring obsessions in human history. Empires would rise and fall in pursuit of it. Wars would be fought, faiths would be founded, economies would be born, and the metal itself, unchanging, incorruptible, would always remain the same. Not just a resource, but a symbol. Not just a metal, but a myth. As civilizations began to rise from scattered tribes and nomadic groups, gold took on new meaning. It was no longer just a rare metal admired for its glow. It became a tool of legitimacy, a weapon of influence, and a language of divinity. In ancient Egypt, gold was everywhere, but not for everyone. It was the metal of the gods, reserved for pharaohs, priests, and the afterlife. Egyptian goldsmiths were among the most skilled artisans of the ancient world, crafting elaborate jewelry, statues, and funerary masks from the rich deposits of Nubia to the south. These mines, often worked by enslaved labor, helped fuel Egypt's legendary wealth. To the Egyptians, gold wasn't just beautiful, it was eternal. It never rusted, never faded, and never decayed. This made it the perfect symbol for the pharaoh's immortality. The tomb of Tutankhamun, unearthed in 1922, remains one of the most breathtaking examples of gold's role in royal death rituals. His solid gold funerary mask, weighing over 20 pounds, wasn't just an ornament, it was a proclamation. A message that the young king was no mere mortal. In death, he was divine. Gold lined the walls of royal tombs, coated statues of gods, and formed the sacred objects used in religious rites. Even the gods were imagined as golden beings, radiant, immortal, perfect. The metal became a bridge between the human and the heavenly. And Egypt was not alone. To the northeast, in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, gold was both sacred and strategic. The Sumerians, who built the first cities and invented writing, revered gold as a gift from the gods. They used it to craft temple decorations, ceremonial daggers, and royal ornaments. In the great ziggurats of Ur and Eridu, gold offerings were laid before statues of deities. For these early city-states, control over gold was not only economic, it was spiritual and political. Priests and kings were often one and the same, and gold was the medium that legitimized their power. As Mesopotamian empires expanded, gold became a tool of diplomacy and dominance. Tribute in the form of gold poured into the capitals of Babylon and Assyria from surrounding regions. Gold was a reward for loyalty and a punishment for defiance. Its accumulation signaled success. Its absence foretold weakness. Farther east in the cities of the Indus Valley, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and others, gold craftsmanship reached new levels of intricacy. Artisans produced finely detailed beads, earrings, and headpieces using techniques that suggest a highly sophisticated understanding of metallurgy. Though we still cannot read their script, their artifacts speak of a society that held gold in high esteem, not just for ornamentation, but as a marker of status and sophistication. Interestingly, across these ancient civilizations, separated by geography, language, and culture, gold served the same essential roles: a display of power, a vehicle for religious meaning, and an early form of currency. Long before the first stamped coins, gold was used in trade, measured by weight, trusted for its purity, and valued for its rarity. Its universal desirability made it the perfect medium of exchange. Merchants in Mesopotamia, traders on the Indus, and nobles in Thebes all understood gold's worth. It was the ancient world's closest thing to a global standard. But what truly set gold apart was its connection to divine authority. It wasn't just wealth, it was sanctioned wealth. To rule over gold was to rule by heavenly mandate. It conferred a sense of cosmic order. The pharaohs of Egypt, the priest kings of Sumer, and the rulers of the Harappan elite all used gold to affirm their connection to the divine. Whether placed on altars, worn in crowns or sealed in tombs, gold marked the boundary between the sacred and the profane. Even in times of war, gold retained its sanctity. Victorious kings seized gold not just to enrich their treasuries, but to discredit their enemies' gods. To strip a temple of its gold was to declare spiritual superiority. Conquest was often accompanied by looting, but the looting of gold had a ritualistic dimension. It was about breaking the enemy's connection to divine protection. And so, gold in the ancient world was far more than a metal. It was a mirror of society, reflecting its hierarchies, its beliefs, and its ambitions. It united economies, religions, and empires. It was shaped by human hands, but it shaped civilizations in return. Even then, thousands of years ago, it had begun to transcend its physical form. Gold was already turning into an idea, a symbol that meant something greater than itself. And in that idea lay its greatest power. Gold did more than dazzle the eyes. It built empires. From the sprawling roads of Rome to the sacred temples of the Andes, gold was the lifeblood of political power, military conquest, and divine rule. It was no longer just a symbol. It was a system. In ancient Rome, gold was currency, propaganda, and fuel for ambition. The Romans were among the first to create a truly monetized empire, and gold played a central role in that transformation. The aureus, a gold coin introduced during the late Republic, was used to pay soldiers, fund wars, and stabilize the economy. But it was more than money. It was messaging. Stamped with the faces of emperors, each coin reinforced the power of the state and the image of eternal Rome. Gold flowed into Roman coffers through conquest. As Roman legions expanded across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, they seized gold from rival kingdoms, temples, and treasuries. Victories weren't just recorded in scrolls, they were minted into coins. These coins financed further campaigns, built roads, and bought loyalty. Gold was Rome's engine, and as long as it flowed, so did the empire. But Rome was not alone in this strategy. Across the Atlantic, in the lush valleys and high mountains of the Americas, gold held a sacred status long before Europeans arrived. In the great civilizations of Mesoamerica and South America, gold was revered, not as money, but as spiritual essence. The Aztecs, who ruled much of central Mexico, called gold Teocuitlatl, the excrement of the gods, a name both reverent and telling. Gold was associated with the divine, reserved for emperors, priests, and deities. It adorned temples, ritual objects, and warrior uniforms. But it wasn't used as currency. The Aztecs saw gold as symbolic wealth, not transactional. Farther south, in the vast stone cities of the Inca Empire, gold was everywhere. Yet it wasn't for trade. The Incas believed gold was the sweat of Inti, their sun god. It radiated life and power. The Temple of the Sun in Cusco, the empire's spiritual heart, was said to be lined with golden walls and filled with life-sized gold statues of animals, plants, and people. The Inca emperors, seen as descendants of the sun, surrounded themselves with gold to reflect their divine nature. But the Inca didn't hoard gold for greed. They didn't measure wealth the way Europeans did. Gold was ritual. It was art. It was legacy. That all changed in the 16th century. When Spanish conquistadors set foot in the New World, they didn't see sacred temples or spiritual icons. They saw treasure. And behind that treasure, power. What followed was one of the most brutal gold rushes in history, the Age of Conquest. Driven by greed, imperial ambition, and the thirst for glory, men like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro waged violent campaigns against the Aztecs and the Incas. They destroyed cities, toppled empires, and melted centuries of artistry into gold bars, shipped back to Spain to fund the empire's expansion. When Pizarro captured the Inca emperor Atahualpa, the ransom demanded was staggering: A room filled with gold, floor to ceiling. The Incas complied. The Spanish killed him anyway. In less than a generation, the ancient civilizations of the Americas were gutted. Culturally, spiritually, and economically, millions of lives were lost. Priceless art was reduced to bullion, and the flow of gold from the New World to Europe triggered seismic shifts in global power. In Spain, this sudden influx of wealth fueled a golden age, literally and figuratively. It funded wars, palaces, and the beginnings of colonial capitalism. But it also caused inflation and inequality, setting the stage for future instability. The very metal that enriched Spain would, over time, contribute to its decline. Meanwhile, the gold taken from the Americas became part of a new global economy. Coins minted from Incan treasure ended up in markets from Lisbon to Beijing. Gold had become a world commodity, a common language of value across continents, cultures, and creeds. And yet, in the rush for conquest, something profound was lost. The Aztecs and the Incas did not see gold as mere wealth. They saw it as a link to the divine, a reflection of the sun, of power beyond mortal reach. In melting that gold, the conquistadors melted something else too: stories, identities, and centuries of meaning. Still, the Age of Empires confirmed what humanity already seemed to know. Gold was power. Whoever controlled it controlled armies, borders, and belief. It could justify war, legitimize a ruler, or elevate a man from obscurity to legend. From Rome's imperial coinage to the temples of Cusco, gold wasn't just the prize of empire. It was the instrument of empire. And it would continue to shape the fate of nations for centuries to come. As the smoke of conquest settled and the modern world began to rise, gold once again transformed, not in form, but in function. No longer just a royal treasure or sacred relic, it became something more abstract, more systemic. It became the backbone of the global economy. By the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had redrawn the map of power. Machines roared, cities expanded, and commerce flowed across oceans faster than ever before. But with this rapid growth came a problem: trust. How could nations trade? How could banks lend and governments borrow in a world without a shared economic anchor? The answer was gold. Enter the gold standard, a system that would redefine the role of money itself. At its core, the gold standard was simple. Paper money could be exchanged on demand for a fixed amount of gold. In other words, every dollar, pound, or franc had a real, physical value tied to the most trusted metal in history. If a government printed more money than it had in gold reserves, it risked losing faith in its currency. This created discipline and predictability. The United Kingdom was the first major power to officially adopt the gold standard in 1821. Other nations followed suit throughout the century. By the late 1800s, much of the industrialized world was connected through this shared system. Whether you were trading wheat in Canada, coal in Germany, or silk in Japan, gold backed every deal. It wasn't just economic, it was ideological. Gold came to symbolize stability, trust, and power. A country's strength wasn't just measured in armies or colonies, it was measured in its gold reserves. Nations like Britain and France stockpiled bullion in massive vaults. Central banks emerged as guardians of this gold, and with them, modern finance began to take shape. This system helped fuel an unprecedented era of global trade. Investors could send capital across borders without fear of devaluation. Banks lent money with confidence, and currencies were no longer just national tools. They became international instruments. But the gold standard had its cracks that would widen in times of crisis. Because while gold imposed discipline, it also imposed rigidity. If a country experienced economic trouble, say a recession or a banking panic, It couldn't simply print more money or adjust interest rates. It had to protect its gold at all costs. That meant cutting spending, raising taxes, or tightening credit, all of which could worsen the problem. This became painfully clear during the Great Depression of the 1930s. As economies collapsed and unemployment soared, countries clung to the gold standard like a sinking ship clutches its anchor. The system that once promised stability now delivered paralysis. One by one, major powers began to abandon it. The United Kingdom left in 1931. The United States followed in 1933, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The gold standard had tied the hands of governments when they needed flexibility most. It had turned a global crisis into a prolonged catastrophe. And yet, even after its collapse, gold's grip remained. In 1944, as World War II neared its end, global leaders gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire to build a new financial system. This time, instead of tying every currency directly to gold, they tied them to the US dollar, which, in turn, was backed by gold. For a time, this hybrid system restored stability. The United States emerged as the world's financial anchor, holding more than half of the planet's gold reserves. But by the 1960s, even that system was straining. America was spending heavily on war, welfare, and rebuilding allies. Gold reserves were shrinking. Foreign governments began to doubt whether the U.S. could honor its promise to convert dollars into gold. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon made a historic decision. He suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. Just like that, the last official link between gold and currency was severed. The gold standard was dead. What replaced it was a new kind of faith, fiat currency. Money backed not by metal, but by government decree and market confidence. It was the beginning of the modern financial era, flexible, volatile, and driven by trust rather than treasure. But even now, gold hasn't lost its luster. To this day, central banks hold vast reserves of gold. Investors still flock to it during times of uncertainty. It remains a hedge against inflation, a symbol of stability and an asset with centuries of credibility behind it. Why? Because gold is more than a metal. It's a memory, a relic of every age it has touched, from pharaohs to financiers, from temples to trade floors. The gold standard may be gone, but its legacy lives on, in every vault, in every policy, in every nation that still measures wealth, in some part, by how much gold it holds. When the world spins out of control, people don't just reach for leaders, laws, or ideologies. They reach for something solid, something that doesn't rust, rot, or vanish in the night. They reach for gold. For all its glitter and symbolism, gold's most enduring role has been as a refuge, a safe haven during humanity's darkest storms. Whether during war, depression, or collapse, gold has offered one priceless thing: trust. In times of crisis, paper money can fail, banks can close, stock markets can crash. But gold remains untouched by inflation, beyond the reach of central banks, immune to default. It has no loyalty to nation or regime. It simply is. That's why when the world faltered, gold often rose. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, the global economy shattered. Banks collapsed by the thousands. Millions lost their jobs, homes, and life savings. Currencies were devalued or abandoned. But even as paper wealth evaporated, gold held firm. In the United States, desperate citizens hoarded gold coins and bullion, burying them, hiding them in walls, refusing to trust their banks or their government. So, in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, criminalizing the private ownership of gold. Americans were forced to turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve in exchange for paper dollars, dollars that soon after were devalued. This wasn't just a monetary maneuver, it was a crisis of trust. A moment when gold, not government, held the confidence of the people, and that moment would repeat itself on an even greater scale during the World Wars. In both World War I and World War II, nations abandoned the gold standard to print money and finance military efforts. Currencies inflated, economies bent under the weight of total war, but gold endured. As borders shifted and regimes crumbled, gold moved quietly, hidden in suitcases, sewn into clothing, traded across enemy lines. For refugees and resistance fighters, gold wasn't a luxury, it was a lifeline. In Nazi-occupied Europe, Jews and other persecuted groups often relied on gold to escape, to survive, to bribe their way to freedom. In war, gold was portable, universal, and discreet. Meanwhile, at the national level, countries scrambled to protect or seize gold reserves. In 1940, as Hitler's armies advanced, the Bank of England orchestrated a massive secret operation, shipping over 100 tons of gold to Canada aboard battleships under the cover of night. It was a move to preserve Britain's financial future in case of invasion. Other nations, like Belgium and the Netherlands, attempted similar missions, some successful, others tragic. Gold was more than wealth. It was a strategic asset, a symbol of sovereignty and a tool of survival. And after the wars ended, that instinct didn't fade. Throughout the Cold War, amid fears of nuclear annihilation and geopolitical upheaval, gold remained a barometer of anxiety. When tensions rose, whether in Korea, Cuba, or Vietnam, so did gold prices. Investors, nations, and ordinary people alike turned to the metal not out of greed, but out of caution. Even today, in a world dominated by fiat money and digital finance, gold still commands respect during times of turmoil. When inflation eats away at savings, when stock markets plummet, when currencies wobble under debt and dysfunction, gold becomes a beacon of certainty. During the 2008 financial crisis, as global banks collapsed and trillions in wealth vanished, the price of gold soared. Investors fled from complex financial instruments and rushed into the simple safety of bullion. Gold hit record highs, not because the world was thriving, but because it was afraid. In 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic shut down economies and sparked global uncertainty, gold once again surged past $2,000 an ounce. Governments printed money at historic levels, interest rates fell to zero, and faith in traditional systems was shaken. Gold didn't offer interest or dividends, but it offered something else: security. Because in the end, gold is more than an asset. It is a psychological anchor. It represents continuity in a world of chaos, a link to centuries of trust, a belief that no matter how unstable the present may seem, there's something timeless we can hold on to. And in times of crisis, that belief has real power. People don't run to gold because it's shiny. They run to gold because it doesn't lie. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't break faith. It simply waits, quiet, heavy, enduring, until the storm passes. We live in a world measured in microseconds. A world of algorithms, artificial intelligence, and money that exists not in vaults, but in the cloud. And yet, amid all this modernity, gold still gleams. In the 21st century, gold no longer backs currencies. It doesn't circulate in daily commerce. It isn't mined by emperors or demanded by kings, but it remains central to how we understand value and how we prepare for uncertainty. Today, gold is traded globally, 24 hours a day across massive markets. It's stored in underground vaults in London, Zurich, and New York, guarded like a sleeping god. Central banks around the world, China, Russia, India, the US, continue to stockpile it, even as their economies race toward digital frontiers. Why? Because gold still plays a quiet, strategic role. It's a hedge against inflation, a buffer against economic instability, a way to diversify reserves and signal financial strength. In other words, Even in a digital economy, gold is still insurance, not against fire or theft, but against failure. But in this new age, gold faces a challenger, a rival born not of the earth, but of code. They call it digital gold. Since 2009, the rise of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies has sparked a global debate. Could a decentralized digital asset built on blockchain eventually replace gold as a store of value? On the surface, Bitcoin and gold seem worlds apart. One is mined from ancient rock, the other from digital algorithms. One is tangible and heavy, the other intangible and encrypted. But dig deeper, and the similarities are striking. Both are finite. There's only so much gold in the earth, and only 21 million bitcoins will ever exist. Both are decentralized. Gold isn't controlled by a government. Neither is Bitcoin. And both are seen as alternatives to fiat currency, especially when people lose faith in central banks and political systems. So the question becomes, is Bitcoin the future of gold? For some, the answer is yes. A younger generation, raised on technology and skeptical of traditional finance, sees Bitcoin as more portable, more divisible, and more adaptable than gold. Digital wallets replace vaults. Transactions take seconds. There are no borders, no customs, no need to physically move wealth. But others aren't so sure. Gold has been tested by time, thousands of years of war, collapse, and rebirth. Bitcoin, while revolutionary, is just over a decade old. It's volatile, vulnerable to cyber attacks, and dependent on infrastructure, power, internet access. In a true global crisis, which would hold more weight, an encrypted key or a solid bar of gold? Perhaps the real future isn't a replacing of gold, but a coexistence. A world where value has multiple homes, where gold remains the foundation, and digital assets become the scaffolding. And still, through all this evolution, gold continues to captivate, not just as a commodity, but as a symbol. It shines in jewelry, glows in art, decorates the ceilings of temples and the edges of Olympic medals. Nations still drape their heroes in gold. Brides still wear it on wedding days. People still dream of finding it, holding it, being defined by it. Because gold isn't just valuable, it's meaningful. It speaks to our oldest instincts, our fascination with permanence, our desire for something pure, untouchable, incorruptible. Even as we digitize our lives, we still want to believe in something real, something you can hold in your hand and say, "This is worth something." But will that always be true? Could gold ever lose its place in human history? It's possible. The world is changing fast. Energy, data, and algorithms are becoming new currencies. Climate concerns make mining increasingly controversial. Younger generations are growing up in a financial world where gold plays no direct role. And yet, gold has survived every disruption we've thrown at it. From the fall of Rome to the rise of AI, from pyramids to pixels, gold has endured. Because at its core, gold is more than a metal. It's a myth we've all agreed to believe in, a mirror of our hopes and fears, a story we've carried through every age. It may no longer sit at the center of our economies, but it still lives in our imagination. And as long as we continue to seek security, to tell stories, and to dream of something eternal, gold will always shine. Gold endures, and so do the stories behind it. Like, subscribe, and join the currency of time for more journeys through history's greatest currencies.